You are listening to Slightly Sauced.
Let the media hype this. You know who we got here?
Good evening, Internet. Welcome to episode 204 of Slightly Sauce. I'm your, I was going to say I'm your host, but I'm not your host. There's a co-host. I'm John, is what I am. I'm John. That's where you introduce yourself.
Me?
I'm not next. It's Alex.
I'm Alex.
Thank you.
Oh, wait. Alex is the co-host?
We're all co-hosts.
I thought Tyler was the co-host.
Hey, I'm Tyler. How's it going?
I thought I'm a guest. I'm Derek.
There we go.
Yes, Derek.
Now that everybody knows who everybody is, hi, welcome to the show. We're really professional at doing this.
To be honest.
We're really good at it, right? Mm-hmm. Let's get the night started off tonight with a couple of favorite things. Recommendation. Tyler, what's it called now? You keep changing the name on me.
It's called Check This Thing Out that I just made up right now.
All right. Perfect. Check this thing out that I just made up right now.
So wait, we're making the things up right now?
Yes, it's a requirement.
Yeah, that's the thing. You have to just make it up.
Didn't you get the memo?
So they're fake things.
Alex, what's the thing that you've been listening to or reading or watching lately that you think everybody who's listening to us should check out?
I finished the book Orcs and Crake by Margaret Atwood. That was pretty cool.
What is Orcs and Cake?
Orcs and Crake. It's spelled really strangely. I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. But It's like it's an Atwood book, so it's a futuristic dystopia, and it's all about like genetic engineering and environmental disasters run amok.
That's what Atwood writes?
I was going to say.
God.
What?
I think I read, what was it, The Handmaid's Tale? It was about back alley abortions in rural Toronto. Really?
Well, she does dystopian fiction.
I didn't know that. I really like dystopian fiction. Maybe I should read Atwood.
Anyway, Orcs and Crake is pretty good.
Okay. Should I check that one out then?
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. I'll look into it. Derek, you got something?
Yeah, I've been playing a lot of a game called Atlantic Fleet. It's on PC, Android, and iOS. It is basically a naval strategy game during World War II in the Atlantic Ocean. And it gives you a pretty solid feel about how naval gunnery would have worked and stuff like that.
Is it like a RTS game, like a top-downs type of thing?
It is a turn-based, three-dimensional game, I guess you could say. But it's a strategy game, so you're physically saying, ship, sail this direction, and then you have to choose exactly the elevation of your guns.
And you're fighting for territory, I'm guessing?
Well, you're not really fighting for territory because it's on the sea, John.
Well, whatever. You could have territory on the sea.
I guess you could, but you're not really fighting for territory. Right, you're just fighting battles.
Let's see. I just finished a book today that actually Tyler lent me. It's called Xbox Revisited by Robbie Bach. This was an interesting one. I really enjoyed it, but it's not at all what you think it is. When you hear the title Xbox Revisited, you might think that, hey, this is a book about the process of making the Xbox because it's written by the guy who was like the head of the Xbox division at Microsoft. And it's sort of that. It's also sort of memoir, but it's also kind of a political manifesto. And I guess in a broad sense, it's a business book about how to organize a bunch of people to do a hard thing. And that part was really, really interesting. But then at the end, he gets into what's sort of been his post-Microsoft career, which is very much what he calls civic engineering. But it's very much like his ideas for how government organizations ought to change in order to be better at being government organizations. So that it's a bit of a 180. But it is interesting reading, and I enjoyed it. So if that sounds interesting, you should probably read that too.
So wait, did he produce the first Xbox? Is that what this book's about?
He was a project manager on the team, but basically, like John said, the book is taking his experience from leading a team that big to launch, a brand new entertainment device, and all the meeting, all the different plans and mechanisms they created to make that successful, and how that could be applied to government and to other civic duties.
Yeah, so he talks about some general business concepts, like the idea of what they call a 330-300, and it's basically when you're planning a project, you do a 3-pager that's like an executive summary of what you intend to do, a 30-pager that goes into more depth about each of the things in the 3-pager, and then the final 300-page is like the in-detail depth document that you would actually use to build the thing. So, there's broad ideas like that about business, but then he applies them largely to government. So it's interesting. It's an interesting read.
Cool.
So I've got similar to Derek, I've got a game to recommend. It came out a little while ago, and I did get it at the time. I just finally got around to actually trying it. But it's Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic.
They're still making
Android
classic.
and iOS.
Oh, okay. Then I was going to ask
Yeah,
if they're
I saw
still
that on
making
there.
those games.
Well, basically, it's the original as you
Really?
remember it. Roller Coaster
Wow.
Tycoon 1, I think 2 and 3, whatever. When they were all isometric and
Yeah.
terrible looking. But yeah, it's on. You can play it on tablets or phones or whatever, and it's exactly what you remember.
Is it on
It's pretty
Android
awesome.
and iOS?
As far as I know, yeah.
Oh, wow. I should
So-
get that off my iPad. This sounds like fun.
Is it like legitimately a clone of the original, or did they kind of dumb it down or something?
Yeah, it's
for
not full of
mobile?
microtransactions or some bullshit, is it?
No, it is a clone of the original. The only thing that they've done is they've made it a little bit easier for the touch controls. So, for example, when you're building, you can still like build all your rides just as you could on the PC. You can still do the directional piece by piece path building. If you remember that, you can build underground, all the same stuff. But if you build a roller coaster from one of their canned designs, it will oftentimes come with some of the cues built for you, because it's pretty tricky on a touchscreen to try and find a spot to get the game to recognize where you want to place your entrance and exit on, or if you're actually trying to select a piece of the ride itself. So they do a couple of things just to make it easier on that regard.
Cool. I should check that out. That sounds like fun. I played that game a lot when I was younger.
Yep, it's Leafy Lake, man. That's what it's about.
All right, well, let's jump into some topics. I got one. I'd be happy to start. Mine's weird though. It's not an article. This is actually a recommendation, sort of, for a video that you should watch. First of all, if you don't subscribe to channels on YouTube, you're doing YouTube wrong. There's the whatever's trending on the homepage and it's all garbage, but there's so much good shit on YouTube. You just got to find it and subscribe to it. One of the channels you should probably check out if you're interested in news and interesting stuff is Vox. They also do print media, but digital print media. Nobody actually prints shit anymore. But they make really great informational videos, and they recently did one called "This Jet Fighter is a Disaster, but Congress Keeps Buying It." So aside from the clickbaity title, it's an interesting video about the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which is a project that Lockheed Martin has been working on for God knows how long in the States. And Canada has actually pledged to buy. Anyone know how many we pledged to buy this thing?
It was 65,
65
last I heard.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be
but we've
100.
canceled the order now.
Oh, okay. Well, there you are then. It's supposed to be $100 million fighter plane, and the goal of the project is to be one plane designed to work for the American Air Force, Navy, and Marines, and then, of course, a whole bunch of other countries have bought in to help support the project. This video, though, isn't specifically about the plane, but rather about the project itself and about how it's horrendously over time and over budget, but can't possibly be canceled. So it's sort of like a intro to the military-industrial complex, and there's just some really interesting numbers that they throw out here. So the project's been going on for 16 years. It's cost more than $1 trillion to develop. It's 7 years late and 70% over budget, but canceling it is nearly impossible, and that's down to what they call political engineering. So the contractor, Lockheed Martin, purposely spreads jobs across as many states as possible to appeal to as many Congress people in the states as possible. And so the project currently supports 146,000 jobs across 46 states, which basically means that canceling it at this point, even though the budget overruns are massive and the schedule overruns are huge, would be a huge economic and political disaster. So they've sort of set this thing up from the very beginning to be too big to fail. And it's a really, really interesting video about that kind of thing.
The other hilarious thing about the F-35 is it's basically almost a useless plane at this point because it's being outclassed in dogfights by planes that are 35, 40 years old. It's not. It's just so expensive and ridiculous, and it's not delivered on any of its promises.
Yeah, jack of all trades, a master of none, right?
That's right.
It's not even a jack of all trades. It's I don't know, a 10 of clubs.
Well, and even though they say that, so your point there basically stems from the fact that it's designed to work for all three organizations that are part of the American military that all have very different goals out of it. that's not even 100% true because each of those 3 divisions of the military has asked for specific changes, and it's not even clear at this point whether there will be 3 editions of the final plane that are built or whether there'll be one edition that just has the kitchen sink in it, which is really, really weird. And the other thing about... Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just. It is actually 3 planes. It's A, B, and C. It's going to have it has a regular Air Force ground-based takeoff. It will have a Navy package with a tail hook, and then it'll have a vertical takeoff and landing for the Marine Corps.
Oh God, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, so it's 3 planes with like it's all minor changes, but the idea was to actually have a plane that's about, I think, 90% the same and some minor component changes for each.
Now, I remember a couple elections ago, the issue for us when we were debating it was the fact that it didn't have enough fuel to do all the Arctic flying, I guess it had to do. Is that still the case, or did they ever fix that? Like,
I think they had to add on portable storage containers for the Canadian missions. Which is funny because it completely negates the stealth factor of it.
Yeah, that's it. It doesn't particularly do anything well, so that's why I always found it hilarious.
It also didn't have a dual engine, which was something the Canadian Air Force wanted.
That's right. They were saying that with if that one engine fails and you're flying over Nunavut, you're stranded.
That's a bit of a problem, yeah. Wasn't there also a bunch of controversy over, in Canada anyway, over what it would cost to maintain these things after they were purchased?
Yeah, I think there was, they redid the projections of the costs, and it basically doubled of the maintenance costs.
And they do it by per unit costs, and the per unit cost is based on, a lot of it is, what is it? Because the company says, all right, we need to sell this many to make this much money, so they try to base contracts around that on the per unit cost, but then the cost overruns go up, so no one has any idea how much this thing costs.
Well, and to that point, one of the things that the video points out too is that the plane is being created in a very, very odd way that seems kind of stupid to anybody who's ever worked on producing a product before. They point out that it's being designed, tested, and produced all at the same time. And the goal of this strategy is to ramp up job creation fast, because if you want to appeal to a lot of legislators to make sure that the project is safe, you want to employ a lot of people in their districts really quickly. So they want to start producing the plane even though it's not fully tested or designed yet. So they've actually produced working versions of the plane that have gone out for early testing to multiple countries, but they keep having to recall those early versions to make fixes whenever testing finds a problem because they're producing stuff before it's finalized. And so that, in turn, raises the cost of everything because it's really expensive to fix a problem after you've started production. You've got to retool lines and retrain assembly workers and all kinds of stuff like that. But it suits the political goals of the project just fine. And that is reflected in the fact that in 2015, the project got more money even though Lockheed didn't ask for any money. And over the 3 years previous, total defense spending in the American military had been cut, and yet the F-35 project did not see any cuts. Like, basically the thing is not going anywhere. Even if everybody agreed that it's garbage tomorrow, they can't possibly stop making it. And that's a success, I guess, from Lockheed's perspective.
It's government subsidized job creation is all it is.
Pretty much.
But the thing, there's also the issue that there's the big debate over whether or not there's even a role for it militarily. Like, yeah, sure, they're building it for different pieces of the military. Yeah, branches. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. But I mean, we live in a world where drones do a whole lot more than jets do. I guess day to day, if you want to think of it that way. I mean, there's not a whole lot of dogfighting going on these days either.
No, the primary target of the U.S. military for the last how many years now has been guerrilla fighters that have fuck all in terms of technology under their belts, right? Like, it's not clear that there's, well, then again, tensions have been escalating with Russia. I suppose maybe they could field an air force, but I don't know.
But you know what I find the most hilarious thing about it is the missile that this thing was specifically designed to fire. It's not even designed to dogfight. And as soon as they brought up the whole aspect that, oh my God, this thing's being beat by F-16s.
Which are how old now?
The F-16's first flight was like in 76 or 74. So, but like there's modernizations of it, right?
Sure,
like
of course. It's been undergoing work for years, but.
Anyways, this missile is basically a cruise missile. It's designed to shoot or fire 100 kilometers. So a drone can do that. You can just fly up a drone and fire your missile 100 kilometers. And really, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to get shot down by another missile that's flying at you from 100 kilometers away.
Yeah, it's a hell of a thing.
I feel like they should have asked just any group of, like a group of programmers or something, been like, hey, can you make this ridiculously complicated program work perfectly on 3 platforms? And I feel like everyone would have said no, and that should have told them about.
I mean, you say that, but having been a professional programmer for a while now, I'll tell you that there's business groups that would have told you to do it anyway. Like,
yeah.
This shit happens in all industries. And, one of the things that kind of frustrates me in general about government versus private sector things is when you hear somebody say, oh, well, the government can't fucking do anything right. They're always going over budget with projects. Well, yeah, but have you ever worked in a corporation? Like, the inherent waste that's in any group of people that's trying to build a large project is stunning. You know what I mean? So it's not clear to me that this could be done any better by the government. What is clear to me is that it's been manufactured by the project managers to basically make it impossible to fail.
So that's the only thing that would have been possibly different if it was done within the private sector, is they might have killed it off earlier and not thought too much about it. But I guess this is the same thing that like NASA faces all the time, right? You're spending all this money on stuff that oftentimes doesn't get anywhere. So it's really the economic multipliers that come out of it is the main reason it's even worth doing in the first place.
Well,
but
like you said,
I'm
it's a
wondering
big
if there's
job
any
creation program, right? I mean, and plus there's a whole bunch of patents and inventions.
Well, so that's what I was going to say. Is I'm wondering how much. But here's the thing: I'm sure Lockheed owns all of them. So I'm wondering how much new technology they're actually developing, and whether or not we're ever going to be able to use it on another project without having to pay for it
Lockheed
again.
and Boeing and Grumman and Raytheon and others are effectively extensions of the U.S. government. Like, the government approves every single deal they do. So while they are private companies, I mean, they may as well be government entities.
Well, that's like Bombardier here. Like, when was the last time they ever delivered a train or a plane on time? Like, we just keep pouring money into that company, and they keep giving us.
But they're strategically important, right? Because, arguably,
nationalize them again.
That's right. We want Canada to have a seat at the table in aerospace, right? So they're strategically important enough that we keep pouring money into them. Anyway, that's about all I got out of that. So if you're looking for something interesting, definitely check out the video. We'll throw it in the show notes. And a lot of the other videos on Vox's channel are equally as informative. They pack a lot of information into a very short video. Who wants next?
I can go next.
Okay.
All right, so this is an article that appeared a few weeks ago in the New York Times by Sarah Jiang. And the title is, Should We Be Able to Reclaim a Racist Insult as a Registered Trademark?
What? Okay.
So there's this
case
in
Can you repeat the insult? What is the insult?
Well, I'll get to that.
All right.
So
all right.
There's a case in front of the Supreme Court right now.
In the States.
And yeah, in the States. And there's a band from Portland who are trying to register their name. They've been touring since like 2009, performing under the name The Slants.
Oh, yeah, I heard about this.
Yeah, and it's a group of Asian guys, and they put it together.
That's
the problem is they tried to file for a registered trademark, and the Trademark and Patent Office said, no, we can't, because it is disparaging to a group because of some law from like the 1940s. It's called the Lanham Act. Yeah, it's a patent and trademark law, and it says that trademarks can't get federal registration if they have immoral, deceptive, or scandalous matter, or matter which may disparage or falsely suggest a connection with persons, living or dead, institutions, beliefs, national symbols, or bring them into contempt or disrepute.
So that's not a bad rule, because like if you tried to trademark, Hillary Clinton's ass cleaning juice or something, obviously you shouldn't be able to do that because it's disparaging to a public figure who's not at all associated with your product, right?
Right.
It's a sensible rule.
It is, but it's one of those things where now they're talking about the strange allies that they have in their corner here, including the lesbian group Dykes on Bikes.
No, come on.
A Lebanese winemaker who had Koran wine. And, of course, the NFL team, the Washington Redskins.
Of course.
So it's this bizarre test to figure out sort of the limits on free speech, because they have a trademark on it. Like, another band can't claim to be them because you don't have to register a trademark. But when you register a trademark, it's almost a form of government speech, which the government can censor as opposed to an individual speech, I guess.
I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I understand the idea of not disparaging a person, but like, what if I just wanted to if I wanted to start a technology company and I wanted to start Fuckbook? Like, should I not be able to register Fuckbook as a trademark?
Well,
presumably I couldn't, right? Because it's a bad word, So, but I think that's fundamentally different than the previous example that I gave, where my word was actively disparaging a known person, right? Like, that's a different thing, really.
But then you can talk about, the rap group NWA.
Right. Yeah. Like, do the Redskins have a trademark on their name? I should assume they do.
It's gone back and forth. They had a trademark, and then it got
did it get revoked?
rejected.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It got revoked in like the 90s, then it got restored, and then it got revoked again a few years ago.
And in the cases where it's been revoked, is it because of this rule?
Yeah, it's because of that rule. And here's the thing.
Wow.
The Supreme Court turned down that because they appealed that case to a higher court and eventually all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, we're not going to hear the Redskins case. And then it came back in this form, essentially. And they're trying to keep it apart because this time it's a group of Asians with their own name, and they're trying to take it back.
So, I mean, here's the other sort of inevitable question as a white guy. Is it wrong for Asians to refer to themselves as slants?
I'd never even heard that slur.
Nor have I, but I mean, that seems like if anybody's going to use the slur, they may as well own it, I guess.
Yep. So the interesting thing is, right now the Patent and Trademark Office is run by, I think, an Asian woman, last name Lee. So it's one group. So she's not the one in the court, but it's her organization that's kind of doing this against another group of Asians, and it's being decided by 8 Supreme Court justices, none of which are Asian.
Oh, God.
And you can actually, because there's transcripts of all these discussions, you can read really awkward conversations between Supreme Court judges trying not to say racial slurs. Or expletives. They bring up a case where somebody wore expletive the draft on a jacket in the 1970s, and that's how they had to refer to it.
That's really funny. Can we all agree, though, that Dykes on Bikes is perhaps the best band name ever?
I think the best thing is they basically have the Village People in their corner.
That's a great law. I'm looking forward to seeing how that resolves. Because you know what? It's one of those things that's worth a laugh, but it also does have sort of a practical head scratcher to it. Like, it seems like maybe that should be changed. But on the other hand, I can see why it is a law. That's an interesting one. I'm not sure that I could come to like a good decision on whether or not that should be allowed. That's maybe beyond my wheelhouse. That's interesting.
Yeah, this is one of those cases where I've thought about it, and I don't know. I could go either way because obviously, on the one hand, it's a group that wants to use the term in a non-offensive manner, but you don't want to have that organization be the arbiter of like, oh, okay, this one's acceptable, but that one's not.
Right. No, and I can see the danger in that for sure. Definitely. Derek, you got one for us?
Yes, I do. So, Cami, which is a plant in Ingersoll that manufactures GM vehicles, they're losing 625 jobs. They're being shipped off to Mexico.
Oh, wait, hang on. Should we build a wall? Is that what you do?
No, I don't think we should build a wall.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's more so I'm thinking about the issues that we're continuously losing jobs. They're never going to come back. And the unions are always like, oh, we want investments, blah, blah, blah. The government continuously pours money into the auto sector, and then the auto sector just moves the jobs anyways. So I'm more so just trying to spur a conversation of what in the world do we do? Because obviously pouring money and giving money to GM to keep jobs here isn't working because they're moving the jobs anyways. And I don't want to build a wall. And I don't think it's a good idea that we basically threaten to invade Mexico.
That's not
is there something as Canadians we can do, like stop buying GM products, boycott GM products? Because it definitely, I don't think, is up to the government to intervene anymore. Because obviously whatever the government's doing isn't working. And we definitely don't want to leave it up to what's that jackass's name? Kevin O'Leary. Oh yeah, there you go. He publicly has said that he just wants to pay the auto sector just to leave Canada. I think that's a pretty bad idea too.
What does that even mean?
Well, I mean,
instead of paying them to stay, he's going to pay them to leave.
That's absurd.
It is absurd because
I don't see how that works out for anyone.
You know what, though? I'm not sure that I see how a boycott works either, if only for issues of practicality, right? Like, it seems like that's the sort of thing that ought to be easy enough to organize these days, but in practice, it kind of isn't. And the thing about a boycott is that if not enough people do it, then all you do is create news for the thing that you're trying to boycott. You basically just draw attention to it. You see this shit all the time when there's somebody who pisses off people on the internet. Well, like, what was that guy's name that said those terrible things on Twitter about that woman on SNL, and he got kicked off Twitter? And people
that was super descriptive.
His name's like Milosh or some shit. But then anyway, a little while later, he tried to do like a speaking tour at universities, and they were like, no, fuck you can't talk here, et cetera, et cetera. And all they really did was raise the guy's public profile and sell more of his books by getting his name in the news. Like, if enough people don't participate in a boycott, then it's actually can be counterproductive, is what I'm getting at.
Not only that, but I would say that, like, in terms of what an individual can do, buying American only works because there are so many Americans. Mm-hmm. And buying Canadian, or even if we, like, that doesn't even make any sense.
We don't have a Canadian car manufacturer or a Canadian.
We do. They just can't sell it here.
What?
It's a whole different topic. Maybe we'll have a show about that in the future.
I actually didn't know that. All right. Fair enough. News to me. I guess sort of, and maybe like play with me here for a minute, because this is a bit of a defeatist attitude, and it's certainly not a popular idea, but has the time come when we just need to kind of say, all right, well, geez, I guess that's the end of the manufacturing sector. And so maybe what we need to do as a group is, instead of the government pouring more money into trying to convince these manufacturers to keep their factories open, pour money into retraining the people who used to work in those factories and transferring them to different industries. Because it seems to me like, obviously the factories chase the cheapest labor, but even if you could coerce them to come back, the labor is still more expensive here, so wouldn't they be incentivized to spend more money on automation and technology to offset the cost of those jobs anyway?
Yes.
Like, aren't we at that point where it's just never going to happen?
The cold hard truth is manufacturing jobs are never going to come back in the same way that they were, if they come back at all. And a lot of this has been brought up over the debate of revisiting NAFTA recently. Mm-hmm. And some of the arguments when NAFTA came into creation was that, if these manufacturing jobs go away, we'll just retrain and we'll get more high tech jobs.
That was the idea,
which has happened to an extent, but for those people who couldn't retrain, it just meant now we have a lot of service jobs, which is fine, but you can't have an economy on only service jobs. And at some point in the future, the high tech and the skilled jobs,
if the regulation was in place to make service jobs remotely desirable. Like, if there was a
service
reasonable...
jobs don't produce anything.
No, but if there were... Yes, but they produce services, and everybody needs services. If a service job came with a reasonable wage and, a guaranteed 40 hours a week like any other job, then it absolutely could be a fine job for loads of people.
Okay, but what I was going to say is, at some point in the future, even the highly skilled and high-tech jobs are going to offshore as well, because people all around the world, they're going to get to the point where they're as highly skilled as we are here currently.
Sure.
The other issue is that those jobs that you said in the service industry that could float the economy, anything that you can do as a service job high skilled service job is also ripe for export. And so I think the real problem here is that we just don't have the next phase of the next economic shift in place yet, and we have no idea what it's going to be. And so I don't know what the answer is, whether it's GM or anything else. And even in the future, I don't know what it is in terms of, our own jobs, where we happen to be in a skilled workforce as it is, but I don't know for how much longer.
Well, and this is cold comfort, but Freakonomics actually put out a great episode this week. It's been a part of sort of a series of looking into the realities of some of the policies of the new president down south. And one of the episode this week was called "Is China Really Eating All of Our Jobs?" And they looked at what's actually happened with job drain in North America over the last how many years since NAFTA was signed, essentially. And what they pointed out, or what the economist that they were talking to said was, the manufacturing jobs leaving the United States over the past 30 years or whatever has been like the biggest possible boon to Southeastern Asia. Like it's been just a phenomenal thing for that part of the world, but obviously it has left a lot of people destitute in North America, right? And so in like I said, cold comfort, globally, this has been good for people around the world. It's raised millions of people out of poverty, but it has also plunged people into poverty in North America.
Well, and I think we've said it on the show before, whenever we talk about stuff like this, especially globalization, but globalization doesn't raise everyone up. It just evens everyone out.
Well, I mean,
it certainly raises people out of poverty, and it certainly does raise overall global GDP, but the level of, I guess it's kind of almost like a level of superiority in an economic sense that we enjoyed over other countries cannot be maintained on that scale.
I think that's a reasonable thing to say.
I mean, so jumping in here on that, one of the reasons those jobs are never coming back is because of automation more than export. And this is affecting lots of countries. Basically, when you look at it, automation has carved out way more of these jobs than anything else has. And it's going to trend towards that because companies are going to do whatever's cheapest for them.
Well, and now we're getting into like a future scenario or like almost an economic doomsday scenario would be, whenever somebody actually finally gets the self-driving car cracked. I mean, think of, this is one of the things actually in the previous episode of the Freakonomics podcast I'm listening to right now. In the previous episode, they talked about self-driving cars and what that's going to mean. And everybody thinks about the immediate things like, oh, well, you won't sell as many cars because people can share cars, et cetera, et cetera. But the one guy they were talking to said, well, I was in an airport last week and a guy approached me who said that, listen, I'm the CEO of a hotel chain. And once there's self-driving cars and people can just program their car to drive them from one city to another and go overnight, what's their incentive to stay at my hotel, right? Like there's all these add-on effects of not just truckers, not just taxi cab drivers, not just people who make cars, but also people who run hotels and people who run gas stations and people who work at the en route and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Like we're ripe for a technological shift that will put even more people out of work. And so to Tyler's point, it seems like we have to discover that next thing that's going to employ people.
Well, we more or less, we don't know what it is, but we never know what it is. This is not new for a technological shift to do
No,
this.
but the world moves faster today than it ever has, right? Like if you look at the shift from agrarian societies to urban societies, that took place over hundreds of years. Even
the Industrial Revolution didn't go at the speed that we're seeing this shift happen either, at a global scale.
I don't know. I suppose. I think, well, one of the other points that was brought up was, what do you do when these jobs are gone? Like, I think we just need to accept that part as an inevitability.
I mean,
I do know that it is considerably cheaper to educate people earlier rather than later. So
it's easy for us to say that, of course, as people who aren't manufacturing workers, right? I mean, I got family members who worked in car factories their whole lives, and that doesn't exist anymore.
No, I'm not even talking about, retrain these. I don't mean like, go get a degree and become a coder or anything like that. I mean more along the lines of we have people who finished school at like 14 or 15 and then walked right into a factory job, worked there 30 years, and then the factory left. It's much more expensive and way less effective to let that happen than to make sure people have education available to them early and throughout.
So your argument then is that to sort of precede these potential changes, we should be up and investing in education now so that the next generation doesn't have these problems.
Yeah, that's sort of the bottom end. The top end is more these industries do generate considerably more wealth. It just isn't spread out evenly at all. So, the company makes more profits and has fewer people. We don't necessarily see all of the salaries rise. So I think that's a big part of it.
I think that also sort of leads to a need for changing the way that we think about taxation in a sense. I mean, traditionally, the government's primary income has been, income tax, right? But if everybody's income is going to fall and yet companies' incomes are not going to fall because revenues are going to grow, if anything, because that's how GDP works, then maybe more of the tax burden has to be put on companies' revenues and less on people's incomes, and therefore incomes as a whole could fall, but standards of living could stay the same. But it's hard to make a change to a tax code that's that drastic.
Yeah, man, that is deep into the weeds.
I was going to say it's super easy to say something like that, but then you realize, I mean, Apple's moving iTunes to Ireland to avoid all the taxes in the States.
Yeah.
It's not like the States have I mean, yes, there's arguments to say that they have higher taxes than other developed countries, but it's not like
Does
they have the
Ireland
highest
still have
tax burden.
zero corporate tax? They did for a while because they were trying to do exactly that. They were trying to get big companies to come and set up offices there, and by and large, it worked. But I don't know if that's still their policy.
I believe it's still the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my question is like, what happens to those 650 people now?
I mean, presumably.
You have to remember too, it's a lot more than just 650, 625, because those jobs, all the parts plants jobs are gone.
Yeah.
That means
It's
all the
the
service
downstream.
industry jobs are also gone.
Yeah.
That means the death of downtown's gone.
Well, and this is what they pointed out. One of the things they pointed out in this Freakonomics episode about jobs going to China is that, you know, in the pure economic theory sense, those jobs, the job losses will be absorbed by the community and the people will just kind of retrain and magically go into different jobs. But in a practical sense, because factories are local employers, high density local employers, what actually happens is a town gets destroyed because, like Derek said, all those jobs disappear and all of the parts factories that funded those jobs disappear, and then the service industry can't afford to stay in business because nobody can afford to go down to the nice restaurant downtown, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and then the local economy falls apart, and then the town people move away, et cetera. You know, like it's the carry-on effects that destroy things as opposed to just the initial job loss. It's all the things that go with the job loss.
Yeah, there's actually a journalist in the States who's been covering this really well. His name's Chris Arnaud, or Arnade, Arnade, but he's been traveling around to all the towns in the Rust Belt and just interviewing people. And he talks about that, like how when a factory leaves, that's like a big community area because that's where, you know, all your friends are and, you know, some of your family works there, that sort of thing.
Now, that said, arguably this could be thought of as temporary in the sense that over the past, you know, well, for a while now, for a long time, people have been shifting in general from living in rural areas to living in urban areas, and most people who live in urban areas are not unemployed. There are lots of jobs for people who live in urban areas.
But I would argue
not
that
in the
urban
same-
areas are not immune from this either.
I would agree. I'm not saying that they are, but urban areas tend to focus on a different type of industry. They don't tend to do heavy manufacturing. So what I guess I'm saying is that there's certainly a lost generation of people who perhaps can't be helped or are beyond help, and it's a tragedy that those people are losing their livelihoods, but maybe we're being too dark and dramatic about it, and maybe the next generation will simply retrain. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but it could go
maybe
other
there's
way,
this
the
lag is
opposite
what I'm
way
saying,
too,
right? Is that there's people who have lost their manufacturing jobs and maybe they won't retrain, but that doesn't mean that their children are doomed, is what I'm
No,
getting
of course
at.
not. I'm actually more interested in going back to Derek's original premise here. And is there anything that us as
Yeah, we're way
individuals
off the mark here.
can do? Because obviously we're not going to single-handedly stop manufacturing from going away. But
this was a
but I don't-
losing
I don't-
proposition from the beginning. These companies are not Canadian companies. They came here to employ Canadians because we were relatively cheaper when our dollar was weaker than the United States. That's it. We were cheap labor. That's all there is
And you
to
think
it.
about it too, like what are the other options? I mean, you can go ahead and not buy cars from a company that has already moved, but who else do we buy?
That's
Like,
right.
We're going to be buying Japanese cars or Korean cars
That's
or
right.
German
You don't
cars.
have a choice, and it's not like the infrastructure in Canada is such that in most places you can get by without owning a car, right? Like it. I don't see that, and this is one of those things where you get into the need for government regulation, right? Whenever people talk about deregulating, the government's inefficient, et cetera, the market forces will solve it. Fucking libertarians are big on this nonsense. But what they fail to see is that the market theory of economics leaves significant gaps when the incentives don't line up. There is nothing that the Canadian car buyer can do to influence the automotive industry that is primarily based in the United States. Zip.
But regulations aren't going to stop that either.
The right regulations could. I mean,
like what?
Well, the right regulations in Canada.
How are you going to
because they're not Canadian
How are you going to regulate
companies.
that
No,
the car companies have
you
to make
can't
cars
because
here?
they're not Canadian
Force
companies.
Bombardier to do it.
But then we'll never get any cars because they'll never be built.
I'm not saying
We'll just buy Japanese cars.
I'm not saying that regulation can solve everything, but what I am saying is that there's cases where the market absolutely cannot solve everything. So this isn't a problem.
No, of course, but I think to go back, I think what you had meant to say is that social safety nets are more important.
Yes.
in this case,
Yes.
not regulations, because
Well,
the safety nets are the things that are going to catch the people.
I'm filing
in the
those
short
under
term and
regulation,
retrain
and
them.
I'm also filing the notion of improving our education system under regulation. I mean, I'm misusing the word, and it's a broad umbrella, but what I mean to say is that, yes, government is the answer in this case because the market can't solve this problem. Not unless we're going to create significant incentive for there to be a Canadian car manufacturer, which, I mean, we could do. Like, for years now, I mean, you and I, we work in a tech industry that has benefited heavily from the Ontario government and the Canadian government pouring money into our local economy and encouraging tech companies to set up shop here. The Ontario government offsets hiring by like 50% or some bullshit like that in order to encourage tech to develop here. We could do the same with manufacturing if we so chose to do so. We could put up tariffs at the border against American cars, although that's a terrible idea and we shouldn't get into a trade war. But I'm saying the government could do things to encourage manufacturing if they thought it was a valuable thing to encourage.
There we go. That was a good discussion. That's what I was going for, really.
I don't know that we got anywhere with it, but I suppose it was a good discussion. What do you think about it, Derek? I mean, your voice was pretty missing in that.
So the reason why I brought this up was today I was talking to a fella at work. He now has a job, at least, but he lost his job a little while ago when a GM plant in Oshawa laid a ton of people off. And it was actually both him and his wife. They worked in the exact same plant, in the same line. Both lost their job.
So
and
I know, just to step aside for a second, I know a ton of people that I work with that had that happen to them when they worked at BlackBerry. Just like you diversify your assets, diversify your incomes, man. Don't have you and your spouse both work at the same spot. Terrible fucking idea.
Yeah, and the great thing about most of the people at BlackBerry is they at least had transferable skills.
That's right.
This guy, his wife now works at Tim Hortons, and he now works a $17 an hour construction job. That's a $15 or 50% pay cut.
God.
This is the issue I have. These people,
my household
don't have transferable skills.
I don't think anybody's household can stand a 50% pay cut. That's insane. You'd have to
and
move.
he's driving 2 hours every day.
Oh my God, that's a tragedy.
So this is not a story. Like this is a story I've heard before from a lot of people in the construction world. And social safety nets, I don't think they can catch enough people. And a lot of these people, they just do not have any transferable skills. Like this guy's skill is he can push a broom, so he can work cleaning up a construction site. His wife, her transferable skill is, I guess, she can bake in the Tim Hortons bakery.
Yeah.
So it's really sad. And the issue I really have with it is we're letting these people down, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, and
so
I mean,
that's just kind of sobering thought, because unless we want to basically start giving up a huge portion of our income to help these people with UBI, there's literally nothing we can do about it.
But I think what you already said stands, though. Even if we did do that, we can't buoy them to the point where they were before. They both had good incomes at a plant, and their household income was probably close to $100,000, if not more than that. There's no amount. There's not enough money to be circulated to offset the losses that they took from leaving that industry. Like you can't.
And I get, like, even in China, I think Foxconn came out with an article a little while ago that they're going to be automating out 100,000 jobs.
As they should. The Chinese middle class is growing, and they want more money now. I mean, it's wow.
But my issue is not everyone can go and get a university education. Like there are a lot of people out there that just they do not have the book sense to be able to do that.
There are, but there are also people who do have the book sense and who can retrain. And I think that you have to work on problems that are solvable. And so one thing that I think could be done is you could make education 100% subsidized, post-secondary education, be it at the college or apprenticeship or university level, 100% subsidized if you can prove that you were employed for some period of time in a sector that no longer exists. I know a guy who I work with who was a tool and die maker in Windsor. lost his job when the company left town, and he went to college and he retrained to learn how to program, and now he's a programmer, a database administrator specifically. Again, you're right, Derek. School is not for everybody, and not everyone's cut out for that. But for those that are, I think we can do them the favor of subsidizing their retraining. Don't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. And one thing I personally think is basically any program that's seen fit that there's going to be a need for in the future, they should really just make absolutely free, because people need jobs.
Well, but there's a problem with that, though, right? And I agree with the idea that people need jobs, but if you're playing with fire when you make something free that you foresee a need for in the future, because what you can end up doing there is overtraining, because the incentive is to go for the free program. So as an example, you might have been too young to remember, but because you're a couple of years younger than we are, but when we were in high school, toward the end of high school, all of the advice that we were getting from guidance counselors and the like was go into trades, go into tool and die. We are so short on tool and die makers, and millwrights make tons of money. And those of my graduating class who did go into those professions, they don't have those jobs anymore. Tyler and I were the odd ones out that chose to go into computer science. That was not something that anybody recommended we do. We did it because we liked it. And it turns out that programmer is the hot thing. So I would argue that, not only do people not have the foresight necessarily to predict what's going to be needed 10 years out, but also if you incentivize something, you can create too many people who are qualified for that thing, and then there's too much supply and not enough demand to employ those people.
You can also create a false need, which is just a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. So now you have a whole bunch of people that you've paid to get there, and we need it because we have the people. You know what I mean?
And now we're at the Lockheed Martin story.
Exactly.
Well,
tying it all back together.
Yeah, we are. At the end of the day, though, I think that it kind of falls. This is going to be a weird comparison, but in the same sense that if you send somebody off to war and they get hurt and they're a veteran, then the country should take care of them. I kind of feel the same, that especially if we're going to talk this rhetoric of people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and supporting themselves, then if people get laid off, if an industry leaves town, if they can't support themselves in their chosen industry anymore, giving them the chance to retrain. And we do have, we've got student loans that are reasonably competitive. We've got, there are opportunities for people to fund their education if that's what they want to do, but lowering those barriers, I think, is important to get those people back in the workforce and paying taxes, right? I mean, ideally, everyone's in the workforce and everyone's paying taxes. That's what makes this thing work. When you've got people who are making so little that they're below the poverty line that they're not paying taxes, that ain't good for anybody. And that's sort of the economic argument in favor of social welfare, is that you buoy people up so that they can pay back into the system, and that makes it better for everybody. But anyway, that's a fucking...
It's funny, John? I'm only 1 year younger than you.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. I'm fucking old,
and actually,
though.
when I was in school, they pretty much took all the smart kids and told them to get into computer science.
Well, that's one thing that they
the
definitely
rest of us, they said construction trades, not industrial trades. They're like, you need to get into constructional trades.
That's something
you have
that
a problem. You should be a drywaller.
What John's trying to say is the guidance counselor thought he wasn't cut out for computer science.
That's entirely possible. I've never been great at math. Yeah, that's a practice that I think, frankly, I don't really like. I mean, I understand why they do it, and I think in the UK they do it even to a higher extent, the idea of sort of funneling people off in specific directions. But there was a real feeling when I was in high school, that, just the way that things were sequestered off, the smart kids were going to university and everybody else was going to McDonald's. You know what I mean? Like, they really, really pushed that idea, and that's not right, nor is it progressive, nor is it correct. For my brother went right into an apprenticeship, and for years he made more money than I did, and even today he makes the same money I do. Like, you know what I mean? University is not the only way forward, and like Derek said earlier, some people just aren't cut out for the higher book learning. It's not easy. Anyway, I think that's about it for us tonight. Anybody got anything else to add?
Tyler didn't even do his article.
Tyler doesn't have an article. He's a fucking slacker.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that's all we got. If you want to let us know what you think about anything that we talked about, give us an email, man. Contact us, slightlysauced.com. We've also got a Facebook page. Just search for Slightly Sauced. You can find us there. If you like the show, if this is your first time listening, thanks for listening. You can get us, there's an RSS feed available at slightlysauced.com, or you can subscribe to us on the iTunes Store, and you'll get our shows in your sleep. Is there anything else we got to talk about before we tell people to fuck off? No. Okay. Fuck off. Bye.